If I sit with you, he might live, the little girl said, her small hand locking around Emily's wrist as if letting go would cost someone their life. The words did not belong to a child, and neither did the way the room reacted, because within a single breath, 3 men in dark suits turned their heads at the exact same time. Emily's pulse spiked. No one moved like that unless something had already gone wrong. She looked down at the girl, pale skin, white dress, silver buttons catching the chandelier light, eyes too steady, too aware. Not scared. Not confused. Certain. Emily swallowed. You should not be here alone, she whispered, but the girl shook her head slowly, as if that question did not matter anymore. He drinks coffee every night, the girl continued, voice low, urgent, like a secret already running out of time, and every night he gets weaker. A chill slid down Emily's spine. Around them, laughter still floated through the ballroom, glasses clinked, deals were made, but something invisible had shifted. Emily felt it. Like standing in a place where the air suddenly becomes too thin. She followed the girl's gaze across the room. That was when she saw him. Tall. Still. A man who did not need to raise his voice because the world adjusted itself around him. People did not gather near him. They arranged themselves at a distance that felt safe. Adrian Volkov. Emily did not know his name yet, but her body understood the warning before her mind did. Power. The kind that did not ask. The kind that decided. Beside him stood a woman in a perfect red dress, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her smile polished, controlled, practiced. Too perfect. The girl's fingers tightened around Emily's wrist, pulling her attention back down. She is the one, she whispered, barely moving her lips, and for a moment, Emily thought she had misheard. The one what? The one who is slowly killing him. The words hit harder than they should have. Emily's breath caught. This was insane. It had to be. Yet the girl did not blink. Did not hesitate. Did not look like someone telling a story. She looked like someone running out of time. Emily opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision. One of the guards had started walking toward them. Not fast. Not aggressive. Controlled. Which was worse? Emily's heartbeat climbed into her throat. You need to go back to your family, she said under her breath, trying to pull her hand free, but the girl held on. You do not understand, the girl said, her voice breaking for the first time, just a crack, just enough to reveal she was still a child beneath all of this. You are the only one she does not know. Emily froze. The guard was closer now. The woman in red had turned her head, just slightly, her eyes scanning the room, calculating. Watching. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like she was already looking straight at Emily, even from across the crowd. The girl leaned in one last inch, her whisper barely there, if you walk away, he will die. Emily felt the weight of that sentence settle into her chest, heavy, irreversible, and in that moment she realized something far more dangerous than the words themselves. She had already stopped trying to leave. Emily did not pull her hand away this time. That was the first mistake, or maybe the first choice. The guard was close enough now that she could hear the soft sound of his shoes against the marble floor, measured, controlled, like every step had already been decided before he took it. Emily forced herself to breathe slowly, to look normal, to look like she belonged here, even though every instinct in her body was telling her she did not. Who is he to you? She whispered, her voice barely steady, but the girl only shook her head again, impatient now, as if time was slipping faster than Emily could understand. That does not matter, the girl said, eyes flicking past Emily for half a second, checking something, calculating something, then locking back onto her. What matters is that you listen. Emily followed that brief glance without meaning to, and this time she saw it clearly. The woman in red was no longer casually scanning the room. She was watching patterns. People. Movements. And for a fraction of a second, her gaze paused exactly where Emily stood. Not long. Just enough. Emily's stomach tightened. She knows something is off. The thought landed hard and cold. The girl leaned closer, her voice dropping even lower. Every night at 10:30, he drinks coffee in his study. No one is allowed inside except her. Emily blinked, the detail too specific to ignore, too precise to dismiss as imagination. And every night she adds something, the girl continued, her fingers trembling now despite the control in her voice, not enough to kill him fast, just enough to make him weaker, slower, easier. Emily felt her heartbeat in her throat. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because that was the part that made the least sense, out of all the impossible things happening around her. Out of everyone in this room, you chose me? The girl's eyes softened for the first time, just a flicker, just a crack in the urgency. Because you are not part of this world. Emily's breath caught. That answer was not comforting. It was terrifying. Because it meant she had no protection, no understanding, no way to predict what would happen next. The guard stopped just a few feet away now. Close enough that Emily could feel his presence without looking directly at him. Close enough that walking away would no longer look casual. The girl straightened slightly, releasing just a fraction of the tension in her grip, but not letting go. If you walk away now, nothing changes, she said, her voice quieter, steadier, but heavier, like a final warning, and tomorrow night, he will be worse. Emily's mind raced. This was insane. A child. A secret. A powerful man she did not know. A woman who might be watching her right now. Every logical part of her screamed to step back, to leave, to disappear into the crowd and pretend this never happened. But her feet did not move. Across the room, Adrian shifted again, just slightly, and the space around him adjusted with it, like gravity itself was bending. The woman beside him leaned in, saying something to him, her smile flawless, her posture relaxed, perfect. Untouchable. Emily swallowed hard. If this was true, then every second mattered. If it was not, then she was about to ruin her own life for nothing. The guard finally spoke, his voice low, respectful, but firm. Miss, is there a problem here? Emily turned her head slowly, forcing a small, controlled smile, the kind she had practiced for rooms exactly like this, the kind that revealed nothing. No problem, she said, her voice steady, even as her pulse pounded, just talking. The guard held her gaze for one beat too long, as if weighing something he could not quite see, then nodded once. But he did not leave. Emily felt it immediately. The pressure. The watch. The invisible line she had already crossed. The girl's fingers tightened again, and this time her whisper carried something new. Fear. You do not have much time, she said, and then, barely audible, she already suspects. Emily felt the shift the moment the girl said it. She already suspects. The words did not land like a warning. They landed like a countdown. The air around her tightened, thinner, heavier, like every movement now carried weight. Emily kept her smile in place, small, controlled, the kind that said nothing, while her mind raced through every possible way out and found none. The guard had not moved. Not even an inch. He was watching, not openly, but closely enough that leaving suddenly would draw attention, and staying too long would do the same. There was no neutral ground anymore. Emily lowered her voice, barely moving her lips. What do you want me to do? The girl did not answer right away. For the first time, she looked like a child again, just for a second, her eyes flickering with something fragile, something that did not belong in this room full of polished power and silent threats. Then it was gone. You need to see it yourself, she said, her voice steady again, because if you only hear it from me, you will not believe me. Emily felt a cold weight settle in her chest. See it. That meant going deeper. That meant stepping out of this room and into something she did not understand. That meant there would be no pretending this never happened. Across the room, Adrian turned slightly, his gaze moving through the crowd without landing on anyone for long, yet somehow it felt like he saw everything. Emily held her breath without meaning to. For a brief moment, his eyes passed over her. Not stopping. Not reacting. But not missing her either. The girl followed that movement too, her grip tightening again, softer this time, but more desperate. Tonight, she whispered, as if the word itself carried weight, he will drink it again. Emily's pulse kicked harder. Tonight. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Tonight. The timeline collapsed in on itself. This was not a distant problem. It was already happening. Why not tell him? Emily asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it, because it still did not make sense. If this is real, why not just tell him? The girl's eyes lifted slowly, meeting Emily's, and this time there was no hesitation, no softness, no doubt. Because he trusts her more than anyone else. The answer hit harder than anything else she had said. Trust. That was the real danger. Not the act itself, but the fact that it would never be questioned. Emily felt something inside her shift, something deeper than fear. This was not just about stepping into a dangerous world. This was about stepping into a situation where the truth would sound like a lie. The guard shifted his weight slightly, just enough to remind her he was still there, still watching, still measuring. Emily forced herself to breathe again. If I help you, she whispered, her voice lower now, steadier, what happens to me? The girl did not answer immediately. She looked at Emily the way someone looks at a question they do not want to answer, but know they cannot avoid. Then she spoke, quietly, honestly, you do not go back to being invisible. Emily felt that land deeper than anything else. Not danger. Not risk. Loss. The loss of the one thing that had kept her safe her entire life. Across the room, the woman in red began to move, slow, deliberate, her heels barely making a sound against the marble as she shifted her position, adjusting her angle, her view. Closer. Not directly toward them, but enough. Emily saw it now. This was not random. This was controlled space. Controlled sidelines. Controlled access. And somehow, she and the girl had stepped into the center of it. The girl leaned in one last time, her voice barely a breath now. If you walk away, he dies. If you stay, everything changes. Emily's heart pounded in her ears, drowning out the music, the laughter, the illusion of safety. She did not notice when her hand tightened around the girl's in return. She did not notice when her body stopped preparing to leave. But she did notice one thing. The woman in red had stopped moving. And this time, she was no longer scanning the room. She was looking directly at Emily. And she was smiling. Emily did not look away. That was the second choice. The woman in red held her gaze from across the room, her smile still perfectly in place, but there was something else behind it now. Recognition. Not of who Emily was, but of what had just shifted. Emily felt it like a line drawn across the floor. Before this moment, she had been invisible. Now she was not. The girl's fingers pressed into her hand again, sharper this time, almost urgent. Do not look too long, she whispered, but it was too late. The connection had already happened. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if adjusting a thought, then began walking. Not directly. Never directly. But closer. Emily's pulse surged. She is coming here. The realization hit fast, clean, undeniable. You need to leave, Emily whispered, her voice tight now, no longer pretending, but the girl shook her head again, faster this time. If I leave, they will watch me, she said, and then they will know I told you. Emily's breath caught. Every option closed itself one by one. Leave, and the girl is exposed. Stay, and she is seen. Speak, and she risks everything. Stay silent, and someone dies. Across the room, Adrian shifted again, his attention briefly pulled toward the woman as she moved. His expression did not change, but the space around him adjusted, like gravity acknowledging her presence. Power recognizing proximity. Emily felt the imbalance. This was not just a relationship. This was access. The most dangerous kind. The guard beside Emily took a half step forward, subtle, but enough to tighten the space around them. Miss, he said quietly, his tone still polite, but no longer neutral, perhaps it would be best if you rejoined the main floor. Translation. Move. Now. Emily forced her shoulders to relax, even as her mind spun. If she stepped away, she would be walking straight into the woman's path. If she stayed, she would be questioned. If she hesitated, she would stand out even more. There was no safe move left. The girl's voice came again, softer now, but steadier than before. Tonight is the only chance. Emily closed her eyes for half a second. Just one beat. Long enough to feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. Long enough to realize something she had been avoiding. She was already involved. The moment she listened, the moment she stayed, the moment she did not walk away, it was over. She opened her eyes again, slower this time, more controlled. When she looked up, the woman in red was closer. 10 feet away. Maybe less. Close enough that Emily could see the details now. The precision of her makeup. The calm in her eyes. The absence of hesitation. This was not someone guessing. This was someone who already understood the room. Emily shifted her weight, just slightly, turning her body as if adjusting her stance, placing herself between the girl and the direct line of sight. A small movement. But intentional. The girl noticed. Her grip loosened, just a fraction, not in fear, but in something else. Trust. Emily leaned down, her voice almost inaudible now. When does he go to the study? The girl answered immediately, as if she had been waiting for that exact question. 10:30. Emily checked the time on the clock above the bar without turning her head. 10:12. 18 minutes. Her heart started to pound harder. That was not enough time to plan. That was barely enough time to think. The guard shifted again, this time stepping slightly to the side, trying to catch Emily's full face, to read her expression. She gave him nothing. Across from her, the woman in red slowed her approach, just slightly, as if sensing resistance, adjusting her angle again, calculating a better entry point. Emily saw it clearly now. This was a game of positioning, of timing, of control. And she was already on the board. The girl's voice came one last time, barely a breath. You cannot hesitate. Emily straightened slowly, her hand finally releasing the girl's, not to let go, but to move. She stepped forward. Not away. Not back into safety. But directly into the path of the woman walking toward her. Emily stepped forward before she could think her way out of it, closing the distance by just enough to make the next moment inevitable. The woman in red stopped. Not surprised. Not confused. Just paused, as if this had been one of several outcomes she had already considered. Up close, her presence felt different. Colder. Sharper. Her eyes moved over Emily in a single, precise sweep, taking in everything, measuring, categorizing, deciding. Emily forced a polite smile, steady, controlled, the kind that belonged in rooms like this. Excuse me, she said, her voice calm despite the tension pressing against her ribs. I think we were about to cross paths. A simple sentence. Harmless. But it did what she needed. It interrupted the rhythm. It created a pause. The woman's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement. Of the move. Of the intent. Of the fact that Emily had just stepped into something she did not understand. Of course, the woman replied, her voice smooth, effortless, the kind that never needed to be raised to be heard, though I do not believe we have met. Emily felt the weight of that sentence. Not a question. A statement. You do not belong here. Not yet. Emily held her ground. No, we have not, she answered, keeping her tone even, her posture relaxed, but inside, everything was tightening. I am Emily Carter. The woman's gaze sharpened just slightly at the name. Not recognition. Not yet. But interest. A variable introduced into a system that did not like variables. Vivian Laurent, she said, her name landing softly but carrying weight, as if it came with history Emily could not see. Behind her, the music continued, the crowd moved, but here, in this narrow slice of space, everything felt still. Calculated. Controlled. Emily became aware of the girl behind her, no longer holding her hand, but not leaving either. Staying close. Trusting her. That realization hit deeper than anything else. This was no longer just about a warning. This was a handoff. The girl had chosen her. and now she had stepped forward. Vivian's eyes shifted briefly, just enough to register the child behind Emily, then returned, sharper now, more focused. Her voice softened, almost curious. "How interesting," she said, as if noting a detail others might miss, "that you are keeping company in a room like this." Emily's heartbeat kicked harder. She knows. Not everything. But enough. Emily let out a small breath, controlled, deliberate. "I prefer conversations that are not loud," she replied, deflecting, buying time, keeping the surface smooth while everything underneath strained. Vivian watched her for one more second, longer than polite, shorter than confrontational, then inclined her head slightly. A silent decision. "Very well," she said, as if placing Emily somewhere in her internal map. "I hope you enjoy your evening, Miss Carter." The dismissal was gentle. But it was still a dismissal. Vivian stepped past her. Close. Too close. Emily felt it, the shift in air, the quiet authority that did not need to push to move someone out of the way. And just before she passed completely, Vivian leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper, almost kind. "You should be careful who you choose to stand with." Then she was gone. Moving again. Seamless. Rejoining the flow of the room as if nothing had happened. Emily stood still for half a second too long. Her pulse thundered in her ears. That was not a warning. That was a message. She knows something is wrong. Behind her, the girl exhaled softly, like she had been holding her breath the entire time. Emily turned back to her, slower now, more aware, more grounded in what this really was. "You were right," Emily said quietly, the words no longer a question, no longer doubt. "She suspects." The girl nodded once, small, certain, and for the first time, Emily saw it clearly. Not fear. Not confusion. Determination. The kind that comes when there is no other option left. Emily glanced at the clock again. 10:15. 15 minutes. She felt something shift inside her, not fear, not hesitation. Commitment. The line had been crossed. She leaned closer, her voice low, steady, no longer asking if this was real, but what came next. "Tell me how to get to the study." The girl did not hesitate this time. She stepped closer, her voice dropping into a rhythm that felt practiced, memorized, like she had replayed this moment in her head over and over again. "There is a service corridor behind the west bar," she said, her eyes flicking briefly to the left side of the ballroom, near the marble column with the gold trim. "No one pays attention to it because it looks like a staff entrance." Emily followed the direction without turning her head fully, catching just enough of the space in her peripheral vision to understand. A narrow door. Unmarked. Easy to ignore. Easy to miss. That was not an accident. That was design. "You take that hallway," the girl continued, her voice steady but faster now. "You go up one level using the stairs, not the elevator. The elevator requires a code." Emily nodded slightly, committing every detail to memory, her heartbeat sinking with the urgency in the girl's voice. At the top of the stairs, there is a long hallway with 3 doors. The first 2 are guest rooms, the last one is his study. He will be there at 10:30. Emily checked the time again. 10:17. 13 minutes. Not enough. Never enough. "Why are you not going?" Emily asked, the question sharper now, more direct. "Because something still did not fit. You know all of this, you could warn him yourself." The girl's expression changed, not into fear, but into something heavier. Reality. "Because I am not allowed upstairs after 9, she said quietly, "and if I try, they will stop me before I even reach the stairs." Emily felt that land. Rules. Restrictions. Invisible walls built into a life that looked perfect from the outside. She glanced back toward the crowd. Vivian had already returned to Adrian's side, her hand resting lightly on his arm again, her smile effortless, as if nothing had happened. But Emily saw it now. The subtle shifts. The way her eyes moved more often. The way her attention lingered half a second longer on certain movements. She was not relaxed. She was watching. The girl stepped even closer, her voice dropping to almost nothing. if you do this, you cannot come back down the same way. Emily's breath caught. What do you mean? The girl looked up at her, fully this time, no hesitation, no softness, only truth. If she realizes what you are doing, she will close everything. Doors. Exits. People. You will not be able to leave the way you came. Emily felt the weight of that settle deep in her chest. This was not just about going upstairs. This was about not knowing if she could come back down. The music in the ballroom swelled slightly, laughter rising again, glasses clinking, the illusion of normal continuing as if nothing underneath it was shifting. Emily took a slow breath. This is insane. The thought was clear, sharp, undeniable. But so was something else. If you walk away, he dies. The girl had said it once. Now it echoed louder. Emily looked down at her, really looked this time. Not just at the fear. Not just at the urgency. But at the trust. This child had chosen her. Not because she was strong. Not because she was powerful. But because she was outside of it. Unseen. Unexpected. And now that invisibility was gone. Emily straightened slightly, her shoulders settling into a decision that no longer felt like a choice. Stay here, she said quietly, her voice firm now, different from before, more grounded, more certain. Do not talk to anyone, do not move unless you have to. The girl nodded immediately, as if she had been waiting for that shift, that confirmation that Emily was not going to back out. Emily took one last glance across the room. Adrian stood exactly where he had been, composed, untouchable, unaware. Vivian beside him, perfect, controlled, dangerous. The clock ticked forward. 10:18. 12 minutes. Emily turned, her steps measured, calm, blending back into the movement of the crowd, not too fast, not too slow. Normal. That was the key. Be normal. She moved toward the west bar, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the floor itself was asking her to reconsider. The marble column came into view. The narrow door just beyond it. Unmarked. Silent. Waiting. Emily reached it without drawing attention, her hand hovering for half a second before pushing it open. The sound was soft. Too soft. Like it had been designed that way. Inside, the corridor was dim, quiet, the noise of the ballroom fading instantly as the door closed behind her. The shift was immediate. From light to shadow. From noise to silence. Emily took one step forward. Then another. The air felt different here. Colder. Still. She moved quickly now, following the instructions exactly, turning down the corridor until she found the stairwell door. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click. And in that same moment she heard something else. Footsteps. Not hers. Above her. Already moving down. Emily froze on the first step. The sound was faint, controlled, deliberate, footsteps descending at a steady pace from the level above, not rushed, not careless, but purposeful. Someone knew this stairwell. Someone used it often. Her pulse surged instantly, sharp and loud in the silence, and for a split second, her body reacted before her mind could catch up. Go back. Hide. Leave. But there was no time. No space. No safe direction. The door behind her was already closed. The corridor ahead led only up. And the footsteps were getting closer. Emily forced herself to move, fast but quiet, stepping up the stairs with measured urgency, her hand grazing the cold metal railing as she climbed. 1 step. 2. 3. The echo of her own movement felt too loud, too exposed, even though she knew she was barely making a sound. The gap between her and the approaching footsteps was shrinking. She could feel it. Not see it yet. But feel it. Halfway up the flight, she stopped for just a fraction of a second, her mind racing through the impossible. If she kept going, she would meet whoever was coming down. If she turned back, she would open the door into a room where she was already being watched. There was no neutral choice. Only risk. Only consequence. The footsteps above paused. just for a beat. Long enough to confirm something Emily had not wanted to believe. They heard her. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Heavy. Expectant. Then the footsteps resumed. Slower now. More controlled. As if whoever was above was no longer just moving, but thinking. Emily's breath caught in her throat. They know someone is here. She forced herself forward again, quicker now, her heart pounding harder with every step, climbing toward the landing, toward the unknown. The light above was dim, casting long shadows across the walls, stretching the space into something that felt narrower than it was. She reached the top of the stairs just as the shadow of the person above shifted into view. A silhouette first. Then shape. A man. Tall. Composed. His steps slowed as he came into full view, his gaze locking onto her instantly. Not surprised. Not confused. Just focused. Assessing. Emily stopped one step below the landing, her body tense, her mind racing for something, anything that could explain why she was here. His eyes moved over her in a single, precise sweep, taking in her dress, her posture, the fact that she was not staff, not security, not expected. The air between them tightened. Restricted. "You are not supposed to be here," he said, his voice low, controlled, not loud, but firm enough to carry authority without effort. Emily swallowed, forcing her expression into something steady, something believable. "I got turned around," she said quickly, her voice calm on the surface, even as her pulse pounded beneath it. "I was looking for the restroom." The man did not react immediately. That was the problem. If he had questioned her, it would have been easier. But instead, he simply watched her, as if measuring the weight of her words against something unseen. The seconds stretched. Then he tilted his head slightly, just enough to shift the angle of his view, and something in his expression changed. Not suspicion. Recognition. Not of her. But of the situation. Emily felt it instantly. The shift. The recalculation. The moment when a simple mistake became something else. His gaze flicked past her shoulder, down the stairs she had just climbed, then back to her face. Slower this time. Sharper. "You did not come from the wrong direction," he said quietly. It was not a question. Emily's chest tightened. The lie collapsed in on itself. The silence between them thickened, pressing in from all sides. Think. Move. Decide. But before she could speak again, the man reached into his pocket, his movements calm, unhurried, and pulled out a small device. Not a phone. Not exactly. His thumb hovered over it for a fraction of a second, his eyes still locked on hers. And then he spoke again, softer now, more dangerous because of it. "Who sent you?" Emily's breath stopped. Not because of the question, but because she realized something far worse. He was not guessing anymore. Emily did not answer. She could not. The question hung between them, heavy, irreversible, and for the first time since she stepped into this building, she felt the full weight of what she had done. There was no pretending now. No blending back into the crowd. No returning to the quiet, invisible version of herself that had existed just minutes ago. That version was gone. The man's thumb hovered over the device, not pressing it yet, but ready, his eyes never leaving hers. He was waiting. Not for an explanation. For a reaction. For the truth to show itself in the smallest hesitation. Emily forced herself to breathe slowly, even as her mind fractured into 100 possibilities, each worse than the last. If she lied, he would know. If she told the truth, she would expose the girl. If she stayed silent, he would act. There was no safe answer. The silence stretched. Thick. Pressing in from every side. Then something unexpected happened. Emily lowered her gaze. Not in fear. Not in surrender. But in calculation. A shift so small it could be missed, but not by him. When she looked back up, her expression had changed. Softer. More controlled. Not defensive. Honest. "I was not sent," she said quietly, her voice steady in a way that surprised even her. I came up here because I thought someone was in danger. The words landed differently. Not a denial. Not a deflection. A redirection. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in focus, as if he had just been given a new variable to consider. Who? He asked, his voice still low, still controlled, but sharper now, more precise. Emily hesitated. Just one beat. Enough for the truth to feel real inside her chest. Then she spoke. I do not know his name, she said, choosing her words carefully, but I know he is being watched. That was not the full truth. But it was not a lie either. The man studied her again, longer this time, his gaze moving slower, deeper, as if searching for cracks, inconsistencies, anything that would expose her. Emily did not move. Did not look away. Did not break. And then, slowly, something shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But doubt. The device in his hand lowered, just slightly. Not gone. Not dismissed. But paused. You should not be here, he said again, but this time it sounded different. Not just a rule. A warning. Emily nodded faintly, her voice quieter now. I know. The admission changed the space between them. Just enough. A fraction. But enough to matter. For a moment, either of them moved. The tension did not disappear. It settled. Rebalanced. And in that stillness, something unexpected passed between them. Not understanding. Not agreement. But recognition. He stepped aside. Not fully. Not openly. But just enough to create a narrow path past him. One step. That was all it would take. Emily felt it immediately. The choice. Again. Always the choice. Go forward, and there is no coming back. Stay, and everything ends here. Her heartbeat slowed. Not because the danger had passed, but because it had become clear. She took the step. Moving past him, close enough to feel the quiet authority in his presence, the controlled stillness of someone who had already decided how this could end if necessary. He did not stop her. But he did not look away either. As she reached the hallway beyond, the space opened into something quieter, more refined, the noise of the world. Below completely gone now. 3 doors. Just like the girl had said. Emily's pulse picked up again, sharper this time. Real. Immediate. The first door. Closed. The second. Also closed. The third. Slightly open. Just enough. She moved toward it slowly, every step measured, every breath controlled, her hand lifting toward the door. And then she stopped. Because from inside she heard something. Not voices. Not movement. Just the soft, unmistakable sound of a cup being placed down. And a pause. As if someone inside had just realized they were no longer alone. Emily did not breathe. The sound was too precise to ignore. A cup, gently placed on a hard surface, followed by silence that felt intentional, aware. Not absent. Aware. Her fingers hovered inches from the door, her body frozen between instinct and consequence. Someone inside knew. Not who she was. Not why she was there. But that something had shifted. Slowly, Emily pushed the door open just enough to see. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp casting warm light across a large desk. Papers arranged in perfect order. A glass of water untouched. And beside it, a porcelain cup, steam still rising. Adrian stood near the window, his back partially turned, his posture relaxed but not unaware. He was not surprised. That was the first thing Emily noticed. Not startled. Not confused. Still. Controlled. As if he had already expected interruption, just not the form it would take. You took longer than I thought, he said, his voice low, calm, without turning fully toward her. Emily's breath caught. The words did not fit. Not with what she had been told. Not with what she had expected. For a moment she said nothing, her mind trying to catch up to something that had already moved ahead of her. Adrian turned then, slowly, his eyes settling on her with a level of focus that felt heavier than anything she had experienced in the ballroom below. He studied her. Not like the others. Not assessing her place. Assessing her intent. "You are not one of mine," he continued, taking a single step closer, his presence filling the room without effort, "and yet you found your way here at exactly the right time." Emily swallowed, the weight of his gaze pressing into her chest. "I was told," she began, her voice steady but quieter now, "that you might be in danger." Adrian's expression did not change. If anything, it became stiller. More controlled. "And who told you that?" he asked. The question landed differently than the one on the stairs. Not suspicious. Curious. As if the answer mattered in a different way. Emily hesitated. The image of the girl flashed in her mind, the urgency in her voice, the certainty in her eyes. She chose her. That meant something. But here in this room, with this man, that meaning felt unstable. Uncertain. "I cannot say," Emily replied finally, her voice firm despite the tension building inside her. Adrian watched her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not warm. Not amused. Something else. Something sharper. More knowing. "Of course you cannot," he said softly, almost to himself, as if confirming something he had already suspected. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the desk, the cup still steaming beside it. "This is the part where you warn me," he continued, his tone calm, almost instructional, "that I should not drink that." Emily's heart stopped for a beat. He knows. The realization hit fast, disorienting. Everything shifted in that instant. The urgency. The fear. The entire premise of what she had been told. "Then why are you here?" Adrian asked, his eyes locking onto hers again, sharper now, more direct. "If you believe I already know." Emily's mind raced, the pieces no longer fitting the way they had before. Because if he knew, then nothing she had done made sense. Not the risk. Not the warning. Not the timing. Her voice came out quieter now, more uncertain. "Because I thought you did not." Adrian's gaze did not waver. "That is what you were meant to think," he said. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the ground beneath everything she believed shifting out of place. Meant to think. By who? The question formed before she could stop it, but before she could speak, Adrian stepped closer, his voice lowering, almost a whisper now, controlled, deliberate, the kind that carried more weight the softer it became. "Tell me, Emily Carter," he said, "how did my daughter know to send you?" Emily felt the world narrow to a single point. His daughter. The words did not just reveal something new. They shattered everything she thought she understood. The warning, the urgency, the fear, it had not come from a hidden source. It had come from inside his world. From someone he already trusted. Emily's breath caught, her mind racing to keep up with the shift, every assumption collapsing under the weight of that single truth. She looked at Adrian, really looked this time, and for the first time she saw it. Not confusion. Not doubt. Control. He had known. Not everything. But enough. Enough to set a line. Enough to wait. "You knew someone would come," she said, her voice quieter now, more grounded, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever fragile balance still existed in the room. Adrian did not answer immediately. He walked past her slowly, his movement calm, deliberate, closing the space between himself and the desk, between himself and the cup. The steam still curled upward, unchanged, as if time itself had paused around it. "I knew there would be a choice," he said finally, his voice low, steady, not turning to face her yet. "I just did not know who would make it." Emily's chest tightened. The words landed deeper than she expected. This was not about being saved. This was about being tested. She glanced at the cup, then back at him, her heartbeat accelerating again. "If you knew, then why not stop it?" she asked, the question sharper now, driven by something more than fear. "Because someone had to." Adrian turned then, his gaze locking onto hers, and for the first time there was something else in his eyes. Not weakness. Not uncertainty. Something heavier. Something human. Because I needed to know who I could trust, he said. The answer hit harder than anything else. Trust. Again. Always trust. Emily felt it press into her, the weight of being pulled into something far larger than she had ever intended to touch. You think it is her, she said carefully, her voice slower now, more deliberate, but you are not sure. Adrian's expression did not change, but the silence confirmed it. Not sure. That was the crack. That was the reason this was happening at all. Emily's thoughts collided, the girl's words echoing in her mind, the urgency, the certainty, the fear. She is poisoning him. But here in this room, that certainty was no longer absolute. It was part of something else. Something layered. Something controlled. Why me? Emily asked, the question breaking through before she could stop it. Why did your daughter choose me? Adrian studied her again, longer this time, deeper, as if the answer mattered more than anything else she had said. Because you were not supposed to matter, he said quietly. Emily felt that land in a place she did not expect. Not supposed to matter. Invisible. Safe. That had been her life. That had been her shield. And now it was the very reason she was here. The very reason she could not leave. Adrian stepped closer again, his voice lowering, controlled, but carrying something sharper beneath it. She trusted you, he said, and that means something changed tonight. Emily's heart pounded harder. Something changed. Not just for him. For her. For everything. The room felt smaller now, tighter, as if the walls themselves were closing in around the choice she had walked into. The clock ticked forward. 10:29. 1 minute. Emily looked at the cup again. Then at Adrian. Then back at the door behind her. Every path led forward. None led back. If you are wrong, she said slowly, her voice steady but heavy, then everything you built on this moment falls apart. Adrian did not look away. If I am right, he replied, then everything already has. The silence that followed was absolute. No movement. No sound. Just the quiet weight of a decision that could not be undone. Emily felt it settle inside her, deeper than fear, deeper than doubt. She stepped toward the desk. Slowly. Deliberately. Her hand lifting toward the cup, her fingers trembling just enough to remind her this was real, this was happening, this was the point where everything changed. And just before she touched it, Adrian spoke again, softer now, but sharper than before. If you choose wrong, you do not get to walk away from this. Emily's hand hovered inches above the cup, her breath caught between two worlds, knowing that whatever she did next would decide not just his fate, but her own. Emily did not pull her hand back. Not this time. The tremor in her fingers steadied, not because the fear was gone, but because something else had taken its place. Clarity. She wrapped her fingers around the cup and lifted it slowly, feeling the warmth against her skin, real, immediate, undeniable. The room did not move. Adrian did not stop her. He watched. That was the test. Not the cup. Not the poison. Her. Emily turned the cup slightly, her eyes tracing the surface, the faint swirl of steam rising into the quiet space between them. Then she did something neither of them expected. She brought the cup toward herself. Adrian's expression changed for the first time. Not shock. Not panic. But something sharper. Something human. Emily, he said, her name no longer measured, no longer distant, but she did not stop. If I choose wrong, she said softly, her voice steady, almost calm, then I should be the one to carry it. The words settled between them, heavy, irreversible. Not a sacrifice. A decision. Adrian stepped forward then, faster than before, but still controlled, his hand closing gently around her wrist before the cup reached her lips. Not force. Not fear. Intervention. Their eyes met, closer now, clearer. For the first time, there was no distance between power and vulnerability. You are not part of this, he said quietly, but the words no longer held the same certainty. Emily held his gaze. I am now, she replied. The silence that followed was different. Not tension. Not pressure. something quieter, something deeper. Adrian's grip loosened, not fully releasing her, but no longer stopping her either. His eyes moved to the cup, then back to her, as if recalculating everything he thought he understood about this moment. Then, slowly, he reached out with his other hand and took the cup from her. Not because he was sure, but because she was not. He set it back down on the desk, carefully, deliberately, as if the act itself carried meaning beyond the object. Either of them spoke for a long second. The air in the room shifted, lighter now, but not safe. Not yet. Emily exhaled, a breath she had not realized she was holding, her body finally catching up to the weight of what had almost happened. "You were never going to drink it," she said quietly, not a question, but a realization forming as she spoke it. Adrian's gaze softened, just slightly, enough to change everything. "Not tonight," he said. Emily felt that answer settle into her chest, not as relief, but as understanding. This had never been about the cup. It had been about trust. About who would step forward when the line appeared. About who would choose. She looked at him differently now. Not as a distant figure of power, but as someone who had been waiting, watching, testing the edges of his own world, and finding something he did not expect. "You trusted her," Emily said, her voice softer now, more grounded. "Your daughter." Adrian's eyes shifted, just briefly, toward the door, as if the thought alone carried weight. "I trust what she sees," he replied. Emily nodded slowly. And tonight she had seen something that forced everything to change. Not just for him. For her. For the fragile balance that had existed before this moment. The clock ticked forward. 10:30. The time passed. The choice made. The test complete. Emily stepped back, the distance returning, but not the same distance as before. Something had shifted between them. Something that could not be undone. She turned slightly toward the door, pausing just for a second, her voice quiet but clear. "You asked who sent me?" Adrian looked at her. This time, she did not hesitate. "No one did," she said. "I chose to stay." The truth landed softly, but it changed everything. Adrian held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. Not approval. Not dismissal. Recognition. And in that quiet room, with the untouched cup still resting between them, one thing became clear. Power does not come from control. It comes from the moment someone chooses to stand where they were never meant to belong. Emily opened the door slowly, not because she was afraid anymore, but because everything felt different now. The hallway outside was exactly the same, quiet, controlled, untouched by what had just happened inside that room, and yet nothing felt the same. She stepped out, her movements measured, her breathing steady, but inside, something had shifted in a way she could not undo. The version of her that walked into that corridor minutes ago no longer existed. Behind her, the door remained slightly open, the soft light from the study spilling into the dim hallway like a boundary she had crossed and could never fully leave behind. She paused for just a second, not turning back, but feeling the weight of his presence still there, still watching, not as a stranger anymore, but not as something she could define either. A connection had been formed, not through words, not through trust, but through choice. And choices had consequences. Emily began walking down the hallway, her steps quiet against the floor, her mind replaying everything. The girl's voice, the guard on the stairs, the question that had no safe answer, the moment her hand hovered over the cup. It had not been about saving him. Not entirely. It had been about who she would become if she stayed. She reached the top of the stairs and stopped again, her hand resting lightly on the railing, the cold metal grounding her in the present. Below, the faint sound of the gala drifted upward, distant now, almost unreal. Music. Laughter. The illusion of a world that no longer included her in the same way. She took a breath and started down, each step carrying a different weight than before. Not lighter. Just clearer. Halfway down, she slowed. The memory of the man on the landing flickered through her mind, his eyes, his question, the moment he chose not to stop her. That had been a decision too. Not hers. But connected to it. Everyone tonight had chosen something. And those choices were now woven together in ways she did not yet understand. At the bottom of the stairs, she pushed the door open and stepped back into the service corridor. The shift was immediate. Noise returned. Movement. The rhythm of the world continuing as if nothing had changed. But she felt it now, beneath the surface. The structure. The control. The invisible lines she could finally see. She moved through the corridor, back toward the ballroom, her pace steady, her posture composed, but her awareness sharper than it had ever been. When she reached the narrow door and stepped back into the light, the room greeted her exactly as she had left it. Elegant. Controlled. Unaware. But she was not the same person who had stood here before. Her eyes scanned the crowd instinctively, not searching, but observing, understanding now how much could be hidden in plain sight. And then she saw her. The girl stood near the edge of the room, exactly where she had been before, her small figure still, her eyes searching. Waiting. Emily felt something tighten in her chest as she moved toward her, each step deliberate, each second stretching slightly longer than it should. When she reached her, the girl looked up immediately, her expression shifting, not into relief, but into something quieter. Recognition. You went, she said softly. Emily nodded once. Yes. The girl held her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. And Emily hesitated, just for a moment, not because she did not know the answer, but because the answer was not simple anymore. He did not drink it, she said finally. The girl's shoulders dropped slightly, a breath she had been holding releasing all at once, but her eyes did not soften completely. Because that was not the end. It was only the beginning. Emily looked down at her, really looked this time, seeing not just the child, but the choice she had made, the chain reaction she had started. Your father knows, Emily added quietly. The girl did not flinch. Did not react with surprise. She only nodded, as if that had always been part of the outcome. Of course he does, she said. Emily felt that land deeper than she expected. Of course he does. The simplicity of it carried something heavier. Something planned. Something understood long before Emily ever stepped into the room. She studied the girl more closely now, her voice lower, more careful. Did you know that would happen? The girl looked at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable in a way no child should be able to hold. Then she answered, just as quietly. I knew he needed someone who was not afraid to choose. Emily felt the echo of that settle inside her, not as comfort, but as realization. This had never been random. Not entirely. She had not just walked into this story. She had been seen. Selected. Not for who she was, but for what she would do. And as the music swelled again around them, and the world continued as if nothing had changed, Emily understood one final thing. Some doors do not close behind you. They stay open, quietly, waiting for the moment you realize you have already stepped too far to turn back. Emily stood still for a moment longer, the noise of the gala wrapping around her like a world she no longer fully belonged to, the lights brighter than before, the voices louder, but none of it touching her the same way. The girl's words stayed with her, quiet but permanent, like something carved beneath the surface. You were not supposed to matter. And yet she had. Emily looked down at the girl, at Lily, really seeing her now, not just as a child caught in something dangerous, but as someone who had understood the weight of choice long before she should have. You knew he would not drink it, Emily said softly, not accusing, not questioning, just placing the truth where it belonged. Lily's gaze did not waver. I knew he would wait, she replied, her voice calm, steady in a way that no longer surprised Emily, because he always does when it matters. Emily felt a quiet understanding settle into her chest. This was never about stopping something in motion. It was about revealing what was already there. Trust. Doubt. Loyalty. The invisible threads that held everything together. She lifted her eyes across the room one last time, and there he was, Adrian, standing exactly where power belonged, composed, untouchable, but no longer distant in the same way. For a brief second, their eyes met again. No signal. No acknowledgement that anyone else would notice. But enough. Enough to confirm what had changed between them. Not a bond. Not yet. But a recognition that could not be undone. Emily looked away first, not because she had to, but because she understood something now. Staying in that gaze would mean stepping further into a world she had only just begun to see. And that choice would not come without a cost. The music swelled again, louder this time, the room shifting back into its rhythm, people moving, conversations resuming, the illusion repairing itself seamlessly. But Emily could not unsee what she had seen, could not unknow what she now understood. She turned back to Lily, her voice softer, more grounded. What happens now? Lily glanced toward her father, then back at Emily, her expression thoughtful in a way that carried more weight than any answer. Now, she said, the truth decides who stays. Emily felt that settle deeply, not as fear, but as clarity. This was not the end of something. It was the beginning of everything that would follow. The quiet rearranging of trust. The unseen consequences that would ripple through lives far beyond this room. Emily straightened slightly, her shoulders no longer tense, but steady, carrying the weight of a decision she did not regret, even if she did not fully understand it yet. She stepped back, just enough to create space, not distance, but choice. Lily did not reach for her this time. She did not need to. The connection between them had already been made. Not through words. Through action. Emily gave her a small nod, then turned toward the exit, her steps calm, unhurried, blending once more into the crowd, but not disappearing into it. Because she knew now. Being invisible had never meant being safe. It had only meant no one had asked her to choose. As she reached the edge of the room, the noise fading slightly behind her, one thought remained, clear and unshakable, echoing through everything she had just lived through. Sometimes, the moment you finally matter is the moment you lose the option to walk away.